And go ahead and jump into it. I think we will probably have a couple more people join us, but I'm not sure. So we'll get started rather than waiting. Our discussion today is going to focus on inclusion, and leveling the playing field is what they have in the one of the phrases they use in the book, and I really like that idea of including everyone in the play, and what it takes to really be inclusive in what you're doing in an after school program. So I think it'll make it an interesting discussion. And one of the things that I liked about the book is there's really been throughout this theme that not everyone comes to games or playing with the same level of passion, with the same level of skills, or with the same ability to really join in the game. In this section, I think really helps us dig into how do we create systems that welcome everyone, that you don't have to be a good player to have fun playing the game. And I also like that there's a lot of focus here about what do we need to do to change the game to make it inclusive, rather than expecting the children or the participants to change themselves. And I think it for me, it was a chance to really think about systemic issues, using playing the playing field as a little bit of a metaphor for our education system, our after school program in general. What is it about the system that makes people feel welcome or makes people feel excluded from it, and what are things that we can do at changing or how we do things, or changing the system to make it inclusive. So that's kind of the approach that I'm going to take in the discussion today, but I encourage you, if you have a different thought about it, to share that as well, that we want different points of view. I do want to start out just a little bit looking back at the discussion we had in January, because I think that will shape where we're at today, and not everyone was part of that discussion in January. So one of the things that I really came away from our January meeting with was thinking about how important play is for everyone, for children and for adults. And one of the things we did was share memories of games that we played as children, or that we enjoy playing with the kids that we work with in out of school time. And it it struck me that when we were thinking about games we played as children, those memories really seemed to be particularly vivid. People really enjoyed sharing those memories, and I felt like they kind of had an outsized impact in how we thought about childhood. So it just reminded me that play is impactful. And I'm going to come back to that. It also made me think about how adults like to play, and some of my experiences between the last time we met and today, the connected is I have a friend and colleague, Michelle, that is an avid quilter, and quilting is her play. And the reason this struck me is I was thinking about how animated and excited people were when they were sharing their games that they remembered in our last discussion. And I was having a just a conversation in the hallway with Michelle, and she was talking about quilting, and her face lit up in that same way. She is passionate about quilting, and when she talks about the design for her next quilt, or the fabric finds that she's found recently, or even when she talks about the people that she likes to quilt with, she gets really excited, and she lights up, and it's clear that that matters to her, and that's the piece that really made me connect it to play, because I had a I hobbies are like, playing a sport is a hobby, quilting as a hobby, so there's a connection, but I hadn't really made that emotional connection until I saw Michelle's passion, and it reminded me of your passion when you were talking about the games you like to play. And, the other personal connection, my 32nd anniversary is next week, so I'm real excited about that. And one of the things that was part of relationship building with my husband is I had to learn how to play cribbage and how to play pitch when we started dating, because in order to be part of that relationship, I had to know how to play those card games. And we still play cards, not every week, but every month, and it's how we connect, not just with each other, but with our son and with our nieces and nephews. It is an important part of how we connect, and it's an important part of that relationship. And I think that that is also part of why play is important, because it gives us that connecting point that can build lasting relationships, as well as those exciting memories. So, what I want to take out of that for our discussion today is I want to think about how we can create with the kids in our after school programs memories that are as deep and as important as the memories that we were sharing, as we talked about games that we like to play with kids. Because as the book reminds us, we're more present when we play. We're engaged emotionally and physically in what we're doing, and that really builds memories that are vivid and lasting. And I think that that's important to think about, and to think about how we can build that into what we expect to happen in out of school time, and maybe come back and reflect on really fun games that we played yesterday or last week to help kids build those emotional and reflective connections to the games that you're playing. So I really see it as a challenge to focus on how we can create play that engages all the youth in our programs emotionally and physically, and helps them create those positive memories of their time with us that are going to encourage them and hopefully keep them engaged, not just in what we're doing in after school, but engaged with their school and engaged with learning and building relationships together, as they go through on into middle school and high school, as well as into their adult life. I think that, the most important impact of our after school program is keeping kids engaged for the next year of schooling. And then the year after that, and after that, long-term impacts are important, and we count those and we look for those, but really keeping them here for next year, in some cases for next week, to keep them in school and excited about connecting with people is really important. And I also want to look at that advice on page 146 in the book. It is that where she talks about when they were setting up a basketball program. Well, no, it was before the basketball program, but they were noticing that there were more boys involved in what they were doing as they were getting started with their Why Play Works program than there were girls. And the intentional decision to not assume that it was something about girls that was keeping them from being involved in the games they were doing, but there was something about the games that was keeping girls from being involved, I think is really important. She says, rather than assuming that it was somehow the girls' fault that they weren't participating, we looked at how the games were set up for clues of how we might redesign them to promote more inclusion. And she goes on to say that play really lends itself to adaptation, so you can change the game and do it in a way that fosters more belonging. And then they went into starting a girls' basketball league as a way that perhaps they thought girls would be more involved if they were playing as a team rather than individually, because they were seeing that social connections and connections with other girls were really valuable, and they wanted to build that into how they were playing. So I really want to take that and think about how we can redesign what we're doing to be more inclusive, as we're going into our discussion today. And also to think about what it is that why we're doing this. So is it um to have more kids participate, to improve attendance, to are there behavior challenges that we can change how we're doing things to have less behavior challenges? Or what shifts are really important in our program? So those are kind of some of the ideas that I want to explore today. But before we do that, were there other ideas that you really wanted to that struck you out of this section, or things that you wanted to explore more?
Nothing in particular exploring, but I loved the little quote on 173 that said, we don't stop playing because we grow old, but we grow old because we stop playing.
Yeah.
So guess what? That gives me permission to keep
Mhm.
playing. So thank you very much.
Mhm.
I just didn't want to miss that opportunity, Sandra.
No, I think that's really important.
I think a lot about my nephew. He's 3 and he's brought a lot of joy to our family. And just the intentional effort to play with him is is not always as easy as you think. I mean, he wants to play all the time. He's always ready and open to playing, and he's always handing you things. Hey, well, let's do this, let's do that, or will you play with me? He literally will say that, will you play with me, Laura? But I think a lot about technology now and middle schoolers and high schoolers and how that influences participation. And I'm curious about that just because even with my own nephew, who I love so much, there are moments where I'm distracted on my phone and I don't play with him and I'm not completely present. And so I'm just curious about in the school system and also after school, phones are so tricky because I think that a lot of kids would play if they don't have the option to be chatting on Instagram with their friends, but they don't because it's just normal to be on their phones in a corner, maybe talking to each other, maybe not. And so I guess that's just kind of something that comes up a lot as I'm reading, because I agree in the importance of play. I personally am a big fan of being an adult that plays. But yeah, I don't know, just for conversation purposes, I'm curious if anyone else has thought about that.
I do think that technology is one of the things that really distracts us from play. It also opens up new ways to play, but I I I find it more distracting than encouraging a play for me. And maybe that's partly my age too.
Well, and I think the technology allows you to be more in isolation, right? So you can do on screen the same game that you could do on a actual game board in which you're taking turns and having a conversation and having just the physical movement of the pieces, counting, watching the patterns, etc. If you're just staring at the screen, you don't have that communication exchange, or even watching how someone else in a way is getting closer to the board. I mean, you really do isolate yourself as kind of a one on the computer versus people interaction, right? And so that gets into the social and emotional piece that we're disconnected also, kind of what Laura was saying, and not distracted as well, but also not that emotional connection and building relationships that you highlighted so specially at the beginning, right? So I think there is, And I think there has to be a balance. It exists. And like you just said, there are new things that come about in different thinking and etc. But I think we lose a lot if we don't have a balance and expose children to both situations.
I will say in the after school world, esports is a huge thing right now. Well, not just the after school world, but teenage world. Kids can get college scholarships. Honestly, they can get their way to college paid for by being on an esports team. And it's a sanctioned sport in Nebraska through NSAA and I believe nationally. And so it's interesting to see like these kids with their headsets and they're sitting in front of computers and there might be 6 of them in the same room, but they're really not interacting with each other. They're interacting with this team online. So it is a different way. I mean, it is. And I think it's good that it's called a sport because it's not your traditional sport that requires physical activity. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying it's another way to involve another slice of the demographics that otherwise might not participate in anything like that. It gives them a chance to be on a team and experience some of that, those benefits of sports or athletics or play, but it's a different way of looking at it. Now, on the flip side of that, I've been reading a lot about just the disconnectedness, especially of youth and like kids that don't even care about getting a driver's license till they're 20 years old. I've seen someone recently had done some research on this and they posted a picture of, say, even 15 years ago, a gathering of young people and they're just all interacting, talking, they're outdoors at this big parking lot and they go, we don't see so much of that anymore. Everybody's on their phone and everything is, a planned, you don't just start talking to people. You don't just pick up a phone and call a friend. You text first and find out if hey, do you have time to talk or whatever. So it's very different, I think, for young people now than even when I'm much older than most of you. But I mean, think about how it was when we all grew up and it was so very different. We didn't have that cell phone always with us. And I mean, for safety's purposes, I do like the connectedness, but on the other hand, I think kids are missing out on an awful lot of opportunities to develop themselves, those natural progressions in child development or beyond childhood, but just those natural steps in growing up that are being kind of short-circuited because of all the technology, I think.
Well, and I agree with you, and also to have like spontaneous social interactions, like those are like and this is just a personal notification. Can you guys hear me okay?
Huh?
Okay, just checking. Yeah. Different set of headphones than normal. So just that like they sort of don't know what to. I've noticed a lot of kids like they just don't know what to do when they meet somebody they don't already know. They just don't have those opportunities as much because everything is so scheduled, planned, and organized around it. And it's I don't know, I don't like it.
I know that
makes me want to boot my kids out the door.
I know that researchers are really looking at that, just the effects of COVID, what that did to young people, especially kids in high school or college, or kids just graduating from college that were ready to enter the workforce, and then the pandemic started. And I've talked to other people that have got children of that age, and they said, gosh, but they developmentally, they missed, there's a gap in there in just, those normal experiences in growing up where they were, isolated from their friends and they weren't able to go to school. And I don't know. I think the pandemic definitely affected it affected everyone on this planet, birth to however old, 100 years old. But I think in particular, young people really took the brunt of it because they were in those, those ages where you're just developing socially, you're figuring yourself out, you're figuring out the world, or you're figuring out starting a career, whatever it might be. They've just got a gap in that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop talking. That's my 2 cents worth.
It's also really affected their expectation of the world around them, confidence that things will always continue the way that they have, that it's broken, that there's a generation that doesn't have the confidence that their future will be brighter than their parents, that they'll have, that things will always be good. They know that that's not necessarily the case now, and it's very different, I think, for other generations that grew up in that expectation that the world's getting better. I'll have different opportunities than my parents have. I'll be able to do things that they weren't able to do. I think we've got a whole generation that simply doesn't buy that. They don't believe that that is the case for lots of reasons. COVID's just one of those things. There's a whole lot of things, but that's a really significant difference. Just that confidence that the world's always going to get better, that I think has kind of been very much an American ideal, at least since World War II, that people just don't have that anymore. And
No,
maybe
and
that's an
and
American myth. Maybe it hasn't been the case, but
all the more reason that they need play, because you're never more connected or present than when you're playing. But I do think part of that is, again, the access that we have to information and all of the horrors of the world that we can just see in an instant on a 5-minute update every single morning on the news. I mean, that's part of it as well. But I think that, teaching and modeling the good habits to disconnect from that are so important. And
Yes.
I never feel more alive than when I have no cell service and I'm riding a bike or hiking or, doing something fun without anything else other than what's in front of me. And I think that's something we have to really model and expose our youth to, because it's not natural necessarily. It's like something shifts and it's no longer the go-to.
and it's not necessarily an experience that they're going to come across on their own. They're not going to get on a bike and ride down to the park by themselves. They really, just the way our culture is today, they're much more likely to go to the park as part of a group walking from their after school program to the park than to just go on their own. So I think that's an important thing to think about too.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to dive into this section about inclusion. I think it was about 144 to 162 if you're kind of browsing through your book and looking for pieces. One of the challenges for me as I was reading this section is this picture emerged in my head of a hardtop playground, children from a lot of diverse families playing games like Foursquare, basketball, and jump rope. And it didn't necessarily speak to me about after school programs in Nebraska. That there was a disconnect for me between the picture that emerged in my head as Jill was talking about the programs that she was working with and the programs that I've worked with. And I wanted to I don't know if that was because of some of my own biases being played into that, or if it was how she described it, but one of the things I wanted to do to get started is really frame this in our own experiences and the programs that we work with about what are the issues around inequity or unequal access to resources or opportunities for children and families in Nebraska. So what are the issues that you think about in the programs that you work with in terms of who is excluded, who is included? What are you struggling with?
Well, I don't run a program, but I guess I would just say, isn't it interesting how, like, in my neighborhood anyway, you just don't see kids playing outside anymore. It seems like play is a scheduled thing. Like, how about a play date at a certain time or whatever, that it's not a spontaneous thing like it used to be. Now you get to a program here, I see Lorna, jump in, save me from this rambling, but she was asking, I don't know if you heard her question about what it looks like out on your playgrounds, outdoors, when you have outdoor play as part of your programs.
So you want me to speak to that? I do see kids playing in my playground. I'm so in my neighborhood, and I love it. I love it when I have kids up and down the street and they're playing and they have friends over and playing. They're just free play. Playground, I think, oh, it's so hard. One thing I think for our area is transportation. You know what I mean? I think transportation, like getting kids one place or the other, like that's hard for them. As far as inequities out on the playground, I mean, they all have opportunities to play. I can't name something that's inequitable unless we don't have enough equipment or we don't have the right space. You know, I know they're female, like, you know, I see them, all different kids playing basketball, playing soccer, playing football. I mean, the females that are playing football just yesterday, 3rd and 4th grade, I see that. So I'm struggling with this question, as you can see, as I was struggling to get my uploaded so I could join in time. So my apologies. I don't know.
I was reminded of staffing. I mean, just that, thinking a lot about the section on staffing. And I mean, for the most part, as a teacher for many, many years, most teachers were white women in my school district. And so there were not a lot of men, there were not a lot of teachers of color. And so I think that that really is inequitable as far as for the kiddos go. Like that's kind of where, not necessarily materials, not necessarily, you know, the access, but just having teachers and staff that students can relate to and connect with. I think that's something that I've experienced, at least in
That's a good, and that brings up an idea from that's true, because I'm thinking of back this 3rd and 4th grade building that I was at last night, that the young gentleman that was my site coordinator the last 2 years is a minority gentleman, and he taught the students some really different games, you know what I mean, that came from his culture, and they've brought those onto the middle school. Those students are in middle school now, and I see them continue to play those games and really enjoy them. And it would be something that, you know, those games I'd never heard of or had never heard of. But yeah, we do have a lot of white women, especially in Western Nebraska, but we have quite a diverse students, you know, we have a lot of American Indian students. We have some diversity for our small community. We really do. And, you know, you've attempted to hire, I've hired people of diversity, and, you know, it doesn't always work out. Of course, it doesn't always work out with anybody you hire, but I have struggled with some of the people, I hire diversity so that our staff, what looks like, I think I hired somebody last fall that looked like some of the students at our middle school, you know, and this is like through the work study program, you know, and the young lady didn't make it the semester, you know, she quit after the end of the semester. So continue to try to do that. But when you can't hire people that have the skills that need to carry out the job, you know, we have such a limited pool of candidates to choose from. And we try, I don't know how many times I've, you know, hired people of diversity here in Chadron, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, you know?
One of the tensions I remember from the playground when I was growing up was the tension between the city kids or the town kids and the farm kids. And that was a division. I went to a consolidated school where we had like 6 small communities, small towns consolidated into one. And it wasn't as much like there was a tension between my town and the next town to the east of us, but there was this tension between the farm kids and the town kids, and the sense that there was some inequity there between the experiences that we had as town kids, that we didn't understand what it was like to be a farm kid. I don't know if that's still something that comes across in some of our after-school programs.
I don't know, does anybody besides me have farm kids? Because I have farm ranch kids. I have them. And it's very obvious the way they dress and, but they're usually prepared for cold weather and rain and snow. They know how to dress, and they're usually, but they're usually responsible, and they're competitive, and I love them. Sometimes they're a little bit, so yeah, we do have those kids. Yeah, I don't know if they have a problem playing on the playground. I think some of them aren't as, I don't see it. I don't see it because it seems like they have the opportunities to play in a basketball league, play in the whatever, as the other kids do now too. Some of them choose not to. There are some that really aren't very athletic because they're on the farm doing chores or ranch, but then there's others that are super athletes because they are strong, they're more athletic. They've been working all their little lives, and they are strong and more athletic than some of the other kids in town that are not doing anything. But yeah, I have all those kids. They are interesting.
I think for us, when I was growing up, transportation was one of those issues, and having late buses and some of those things have helped make a difference, because it if you didn't have a way to get home after basketball practice, then you weren't going to join the basketball team, and there were some of those challenges. I was just trying to think, what are the groups? Because sometimes we think about ethnic or racial differences or economic differences. I think those are the first two that we think about in terms of diversity. Gender, I guess, is another one that comes to mind first. But sometimes we miss some subtle issues that may come up because we're focusing on some of the more obvious inequities. I don't want to say that obvious inequities are not a problem either. I just wanted to open up. Becky, go ahead.
I don't know if this happens other places. Okay. But I do wonder, one of the things that I've seen come up on playgrounds is there's the kids who sort of are in who have like some of this is economic, right? Like their parents can afford to put them in all the different sports leagues. They've been to specialty summer camps. They are superstar soccer players, etc., whatever, football players. And on the playground, that manifests as other kids who maybe just want to play for funsies, don't want to play in the same game as those kids because they feel very intimidated by their expertise level. And I don't want to minimize these kids' hard work on those teams, but I do see that it's often kids who have extra opportunities to get ahead in their individual sports. And so I wonder if that's a universal thing, or if it's just something that I'm seeing in the areas where I both grew up and in my current places where I work.
No, for me, that's common. And that has a lot to do with the fact that, in my opinion, like, we created these basketball leagues and football leagues, and yeah, some of those things are like $1,500 to be part of those. I mean, there's just some kids that will never get that start. I mean, think about it. Some of these leagues will accept them as young as 5 years old. So when you turn around and you play on a league where you got they're bringing in professionals to talk to you, and I mean, you're learning the skill. You're not just playing for play. And a lot of these coaches have taken that mindset. This is not for play. And even the parents who are paying $1,500, this is not for play. So these kids are, I mean, you can, I mean, I can walk into the gym at free time and I can tell which ones are on the league.
Mhm.
Because they know how to control that ball. They know how to hold that ball. Yeah, that kid that don't know that is not going to want to play with him. It makes sense. And he's not going to, the kid that is skilled is not going to want to play with the unskilled kid. He's going to want to find that other kid and then who is skilled. And that too has creates a divisiveness because some of them play on the same league.
Uh-huh.
So immediately, if you say team up, they team up with the kids who are on their league that they're playing with on the week. They're playing with on the weekend and they're playing with at practice. So yeah, I think it's something that has bothered me for a while because I think we took the play out of basketball and football when we created these leagues. And even I'm sure I just know my son was on a basketball, but I'm sure they have the tennis ones. And I just think you know, my question is, are you taking the fun away from it?
And I do acknowledge that for some of these parents, this is literally a financial investment because if these kids can get scholarships out of this being this good, I mean, granted, right? Like it's like this percentage, but I get that for some people, like that's the mindset, that's their reasoning, which is justifiable. Yeah, but yeah, okay, well, good. I'm glad it's not just
No,
not just me, but I do worry. I worry about it, and I worry about, like, you know, because I want those kids to have fun too.
Right. Something I do if we're gonna play as a team when they have free time, I leave it alone. But when we have an organized game, I will purposely make them like mix it up. Yeah, they don't
Very
always
interesting.
like that, but I will do it because I just think they need to learn to accept that. You know, sometimes it's just for play. You don't have to take that competitive mindset all the time.
Sometimes you can make them the coach.
Yeah. Well,
Turn
one of
those
the
kids
things
into coach.
they talked about in the book was, you know, adding the rule like 5 different people have to touch the ball before you can go for a basket, as a way to, yeah. And in this section, I think there was that, you know, at one point they said, you know, you had to have a girl touch the ball before you could shoot a basket because they wanted the girls to be included in the game and they noticed the boys weren't passing to them. But then realizing that even having that rule was exasperating some of those challenges and changing it from you have to have a girl touch the ball before you can go for a basket to you have to have 5 different people touch the ball before you can go for a basket because it gets more people included in the game. But I think that is a challenge. I think that's one of the reasons that kids love Foursquare or Gaga Ball because there are no Gaga Ball teams out there. So there isn't that difference that there is when they're playing soccer or basketball.
Well, I probably have something to say about this, right? 'Cause it's basketball, right, Jan? I'm really proud of my staff because I had hired a brand new individual for the semester, and all she talked about during her interview was basketball. I'm like, So, I mean, she's a brand new person, and we start new clubs, like a 3-week club in January. So it's once a week, 1 hour. So I asked her over the winter break, I said, would you lead a basketball club? You know, and I have a staff member with her, and he happens to be a young man who is a basketball official. But anyhow, so then my question to her was, are you comfortable with boys, you know, male and females playing? She goes, yeah, of course, you know. So she included, you know, so I thought, you know, so she included both males and females. And then of course, everybody was in City Basketball League at that time. They're all playing City Rec basketball. I knew they would just love it because I see them all the time with the pack playing. They would just love it. So of course that filled up immediately. And now this week was a break week because they had parent teacher conferences yesterday. They started signing up yesterday for the next 3 weeks of clubs. And there's another basketball club. And all those kids that were in basketball league, they were just mad because they can't join again. I'm like, nope, this is giving a whole new set of 15 kids to play basketball. And she really broke it down to just basic skills, dribbling, dribbling, passing. So no matter what level you're at, some of those kids are really pretty good and some are not good and never touched basketball. So some of these kids that have never touched a basketball got to do a club, and now there's going to be 15 other kids that get to play. But boy, those kids last night when we were signing up, they were not happy. Can't I join basketball game? I could, no, we want you to try something new. How about cheer club? How about art? How about science? How about coming to my classic family games club? And then finally, one of the boys is really super competitive. He joined my classic family games club. I thought, oh no, now I got another really competitive one in board game club with me, but fine, we'll be fine. He'll love it. But they really wanted to play again. I'm like, nope, got to give these other kids a chance. So I was really proud of my staff for saying, no, repeat. We want to teach some other kids some of those skills so like maybe they'll feel more confident out on the playground than to play, to try to play, or maybe they find a couple friends that would feel comfortable shooting with them or passing and they know who the kids are that are more talented that play travel team and all that, but so I was really proud of them for doing it that way. And like I said, she was a brand new staff member, and yeah, I think it went pretty good. The first 2 weeks went really good. She said the third week was a little rough, but who knows, it might've been that day of the day or something. Stuff was hard that day, but proud of her.
The Lincoln CLC did a basketball league with after-school programs, playing other after-school programs. And I love that idea because it really is, as Brenda and Becky were talking about, that there are kids that have the opportunity, and some of it is financial, some of it is transportation, that really keeps a lot of kids from having that experience of being part of a YMCA basketball team or a city rec basketball team. So I love the idea of bringing that into the after school program and really thinking about how do we do this in a way that is inclusive, and that idea that it makes it more fun on the playground when you have some of those basic skills. I like that. And the Lincoln CLC, when they were talking about it, they were talking about teachers and principals coming to watch the kids play, and that level of family engagement that it encouraged, and all kinds of benefits around the engagement that were just totally separate from the fact that it was basketball too. That they really liked that. And that's what being part of a team is, so giving them opportunities to do that, and that's good, yeah.
I don't know if this is off topic, but I'm going to share it anyway because I like it and I think it came up in the book. But I can't remember on what page, I'm sorry, but they talked about reflection. It was when they were talking about reflection. And I was like, oh, that's cool because, and I'll just share this, like one of my youngest kiddo who's 12 plays ultimate frisbee, ultimate frisbee. And one of the things that they do in that league is after every game, every single game, even if we're in a tournament, this happens, they sit down, all the players from both teams, and they go around and they ask them this, and it's like the standard series of questions. And they shoo the parents away, which is kind of cute, actually. Like shoo, this is not for you, parents. You don't get to be involved. So I can only sort of hear the questions, but it's things like, who was the player that's, whose player stood out, who was like the most improved, who did like one cool thing, who felt like they played really well, and like they can nominate themselves. There's just all these like really inclusive questions, and I love that there's that moment, and it takes maybe 5 minutes, right? But the kids all come away from that feeling like we're together, like even if the team they just like went head to head with, right? And I love that like inclusive feeling that they have, and they get to like, and they sit they intentionally sit like every other team member, every other team, so they're always sitting next to somebody from the other team instead of next to their own teammates. And I like those little like things that just kind of breaks down all that like us and them competitiveness that happens and be like, yeah, we just played each other, but you know what? We're all actually in this together and we all love playing Ultimate and we're all just happy to be here and good job. And each, right, like players from one team can nominate a player from the other team. Like I just really love this practice and I kind of wish I saw it in more sports. So.
Becky, would you call it like on page, I know it's a little bit further back, but on
Oh,
137, they talked about the whip around. Is it kind of like a whip around? It kind of sounds like that.
I don't.
Like they ask a question and everybody gets to respond.
But not everybody responds. Like they don't have, like everyone can say something, but they don't, like
a whip around.
It's not that organized. They like ask a series of questions that all the kids already know because they ask the same ones every time. And then kids get really excited about being the one to respond or, and just share cool things that happened in the game. It's a neat little moment of reflection. It's kind of like a whip around, but it's a little different. If I ever get close enough to hear the questions, I'll report back at some point.
They do have a list of the questions that Why Play works on page 162 in the book. I think that
that's right.
Part of Ultimate is that cooperative nature. So I think that it might be worth doing a little bit of research about whether you can find some of those Ultimate questions, because they do have a really different approach to how the game is played. But the questions on page 162 is a good starting place for that. And I love the idea of building in reflection just because that's an important part of what we try to do in our STEM activities, and having that also be part of what you're doing in the play and sports activities, I just see as a win-win there too. I like that too. I do want to jump ahead a little bit, and if you have your book, maybe jump to page 166. This is in the section that's talking about social emotional health of children, and I just wanted to make sure we looked a little bit at this last section of the book too, from like 163 to 180 or something. On 166, they talk about the 3 main conditions that enable all students to thrive. And I wanted to see if those resonated with you, if there's things that you would add, or what you thought about that. It's, we give students choice and voice. We place a focused attention on transitions. We provide a caring and consistent grown-up. And this is the part that I think sometimes we struggle with in after school. A caring and consistent grown-up who has the bandwidth to resist acting negatively when a student acts out, because that is our ideal, I think, to have that adult that it can stay calm when a student is acting out and behaving inappropriately. But sometimes we're not there as adults emotionally because we're kind of at the end of our tether at the end of the day, and we don't always handle that the way we want to. But I thought those 3 things were a great starting place. Those are the 3 things that Why Play Works values, and I just wanted to open that up. Do you add to that list? Are there other pieces that are really part of what we do in after school that helps kids, because we're providing that stability, that predictability? I think that's not quite in here, but that's one of the things I see really important, that the after school place is a place that there's some routines there. And I know at the end of my day, no matter how my school day went, I have an idea how things are going to go in after school, and they aren't necessarily connected to whether I had a good day or a bad day with my classroom teacher. I think that's one of the good things about after school.
I think it's very true that the voice and choice is hard sometimes. The older the students are in the after school care, it's more after school, it's easier to give them voice and choice. But sometimes with the littles, it's like, this is what we're doing and this is what you have to do. So it's harder to give voice and choice because of, you don't have always not enough staff to give any, this is what the routine is. And like you said, they are used to that and they like that. But so it's sometimes harder for the littler ones to give voice and choice. We do that more with the older kids. Middle school, we try to give a lot of voice and choice and a little bit in third and fourth grade. But as far as having that consistent growing up, because every child in the after school program, they will relate to a certain group of staff members, and they might have a staff member that they do not relate to. Like I would know, like, okay, I cannot deal with this child because this child just sends shivers up my spine. So I know that if this child is starting to have a meltdown, that I've got to say, okay, we have a little time out here, then we've got to get that person in there that can deal with that escalation or whatever is happening, And so, and not, sometimes that person isn't always available, or you don't know who that person is for that child. So that is a tough one. That is a really tough one to know, especially if our kids with some special needs and have a unique situation. Some of our staff can handle that better than others. I had a situation last night that kids started escalating, and luckily we got diffused right away and able to deal with that, because I worked with them a lot, but staff, the other staff member kept working with him with homework. And so I think that's hard to have enough people or the right person there at the right time to help that child de-escalate or whatever, because we just don't have that flexibility always. You got 60 kids and you need that one person is leading a lesson, but they need to be over there with that other person to help someplace else to help de-escalate a child. So that's hard. That's hard to have. Not everybody has that skill. You're exactly right. And they're just learning. My staff are just learning how to do all those things. Some of them are really, really good at it. Like they have so much more patience than I have. And they're really good because they have really good relationships with these kids. And sometimes my relationships are really good with them too, but sometimes I'm more the authoritarian. Like they know that, so they'll do things for me that they won't do for the students and vice versa, for the college students and vice versa. They'll be good for me and bad for them or vice versa, because I think the nice thing we have too is that we know about our students. We're very lucky to know about our students' traumas. We're very connected to the school day. So we're very aware of what that child's traumas are. And they're pretty good at passing that on after school. If we have different procedures where if this kiddo's had a really bad day, that gets passed on to someone, to a staff member, the site coordinator, whatever. So we know what to be on the lookout for, because we know this kid isn't having a normal day. So that's a really good thing, I think, for us. I feel like we're pretty well informed when things are going badly during the day. So I think that's a good thing for us.
Anyone else? We are kind of at the end of our time. I do have one thing I want to share if people want to stay, but any other thoughts at the end of this session? This one went really fast. So this is our last section of the Why Play Works book. So we're wrapping up this book club today, and the resources will still continue to be available on the After School Conference webpage. If you want to dive into this with a different group of people, we'll keep those available and encourage people to think about whether you want to use it. And as far as I know, there are still a few books available from Beyond School Bells. If you're looking to do this and you need a few more books, we can reach out to them for it. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to get them into the hands of somebody that's going to be reading the books rather than sitting in a storage closet at the foundation. So I encourage you to think about whether you want to try doing this with a different group of people. That's certainly something that you can do. Kim mentioned when she was on getting us started that she has a survey that she's going to be sending out. The Conference Planning Committee is thinking about right now whether we want to have a book club for the next conference this year and what that might look like. One of the things that we're looking at is a book called Whole Child, Whole Life by Stephanie Malaya Krauss. I think, let me know if you want to hear more about that. But it is a more expensive than the Why Play Works book club. So I don't think, unless we find a sponsor, that will provide books for everybody who attends the conference. I came away this year a little concerned that it wasn't an effective strategy because I'm not sure everybody used that book. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is purchasing a number of books, like 20 books or so, and people get them specifically if they sign up for the book club, so that we're getting books into the hands of people that will look at it and are interested in engaging with the book club, and it'd be an incentive. And if you participate in the book club, you do get a free book, and there may be people that want to do it and end up dropping, but that's okay. That it's still giving us somebody that has more interest in that book, because I love the idea of getting the book in the hands of people who are actually going to read it, but I don't want it to necessarily just sit on a bookshelf. So I'd love to have you think about any ideas you have for, should we have a book club for the next year's conference? Maybe you have another book that you think would be perfect for our after school committee. Just email me if you have any ideas about what we should do. And as I said, Kim is sending out a survey too, so you can please do take time to respond to that survey. But we really want to think about, what do we do next with this, and how can we be more inclusive, and what is it about the system that is keeping people out? And one of it, I'm sure, is you have to be available at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock in order to participate in this, and that's going to leave out a lot of our staff who are just available during those after school program hours. So I just would love to have your input on that and suggestions. Do you think we should have a book club? Do you have a book that you think we should use? All of those sorts of things to get your input, because this is our last time together as a group, and then we're going to be starting in September with another way of approaching it. So I'd love your input on that. Thank you. I also want to thank everyone for the conversations. I've just really enjoyed the time together with this group. It's always a small group. Everybody's voice gets heard, and I learn something new every time. So I really have enjoyed the time that we had together, and I thank you for that.
Thank you,
And thank
Sandra.
you for asking me, Sandra,
You're very
for
organized.
facilitating. Because I'm like, I might not have joined, you know what I mean? If you hadn't asked me to facilitate, but it was a book that really just resonated with me because of how much I love play and physical activities. So I'm glad you asked me, because I might have been those ones that like, oh yeah, that's nice, I'll read that. But because you asked me to facilitate, then I really had to get involved, and I'm glad you did that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and I'm glad that you engaged with it, because you're not, there were some people I asked that didn't. And so I tried to think about that, and I think you add to our conversation because you're here. And so thank you. Thank you, Lorna.
And
Thank you.
Sandra, thank you for the time that you've invested into this book club. I really do appreciate it. And Sandra has been always the one to say, I'll take the lead on the book club. So really appreciate all your efforts. And I believe that Kim sent that survey out while we were having this meeting. So, and that was her intention, to get it out right away. So just kind of look in your inbox, and it should have gone to everybody that was at the last conference. But if you